These are some additional notes on stimulants, basically in addition to nicotine and caffeine, which we covered already. Here we'll be hearing about cocaine, amphetamines, and methamphetamines. The first one we're going to look at is cocaine, and maybe from the name cocaine, you can get a sense of where the drug comes from. It comes from the coca plant. The coca plant gives the name to Coca-Cola. And a little bit more on Coca-Cola later, and we'll find out if the myth about cocaine and Coca-Cola is actually true. And if you don't know what I mean by myth, stay tuned. Okay, so cocaine was first extracted or removed from the coca plant, the chemical that forms cocaine, in the mid-1800s. But long before cocaine was around, farmers in South and Central America would use the coca plant to chew on like a mild stimulant. Chewing coca leaves is quite mild in comparison to cocaine, like much, much more mild. It's not strong at all. But cocaine was used for a variety of things when it first came out. In the mid-1800s, it was shown to be a very strong oral anesthetic, a topical, which means you rub it on the skin. You rub it on your gums, and it becomes an oral anesthetic. It numbs the pain. Cocaine can be used in a number of different ways. It can be snorted, which is like sniffed up the nose. It can be smoked or injected if it's melted down. Basically what it does is block the reuptake of dopamine. And if you're blocking dopamine from being kind of sucked back up into its neurotransmitter, you got a lot more dopamine in the synapse, and that means a lot more dopamine is going to be fired between cells in the brain. And dopamine makes you really remember the good feeling that you have from drugs or many other positive experiences. Here's a couple of pictures of cocaine. On the left, you see standard white, so-called powder cocaine, and then crack cocaine on the right. It's called crack because it makes a crackling sound if it's smoked, and it's sometimes called rock. And it, as you can see, it is in sort of this form of like hard little fragments compared to the powder. The short-term effects of cocaine are intense euphoria. When you're using cocaine, it causes an intense feeling of well-being, and it happens very quickly. It comes on quickly, but the effects are relatively short-lived. The effects don't last very long, and then that gives the person the urge to use more. That's how people develop a habit or even an addiction to using cocaine. So the short-term effects refer to when you're using the drug, but over time, as you continue to use, we call this the long-term effects. The long-term effects of a very powerful stimulant are quite bad. Heart disease is a big one. Speeding up your heart, which is what any stimulant, even caffeine, can make your heart beat a little faster. Cocaine can do it a lot more intensely, and over time that can lead to some serious heart problems. It can also damage your septum. The septum is that if you ever feel inside your nose, the septum is the thing that separates your two nostrils, and you can damage that. You can cause injury to it. You can cause lesions in your septum. So it's quite serious. Before cocaine was illegal, and if I hadn't said it already, cocaine and every other drug was legal in the 1800s. The 19th century, in other words, there were no drugs that were banned. Cocaine was used in a wide variety of common products that you could go buy either at the drugstore or your general store. These cocaine toothache drops would be similar to like the products that they sell today that don't have cocaine in them, but you'd use them for the same reason. Things like, if you've ever heard of Anbesol, that's like a gel that you can use for toothaches. Well, cocaine was used for the same thing. And cocaine was also put into certain types of wine. And when that was done, they called it coca wine. It could be added to red wine or white wine. And that was a fairly popular beverage in the late 1800s. And speaking of beverages in the late 1800s, Coca-Cola did indeed get its name, coca, from the coca leaf, and it really did have cocaine in it when it first came out. That is not a myth or an urban legend. It really did have cocaine in it. And then in, I believe it was the 1890s, cocaine was finally viewed as not so harmless. And Coca-Cola took the cocaine out, and that is probably when they added the caffeine that Coca-Cola is known for today. By the way, is a little fact that not everyone knows. Cocaine can be used legally by prescription in hospitals as a topical anesthetic. It can be used to numb the pain in oral surgery. So it is not completely banned. It's used only in hospitals, though. All right, another type of stimulants or stimulant is the group of drugs known as amphetamines. These include things like brand name drugs called Benzedrine, Ritalin, and Adderall. These are all stimulants of certain types. Ritalin and Adderall are used to treat attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, otherwise known as ADHD, and they are actually stimulants that are used. But some people take them recreationally to get high on them. Amphetamines are powerful stimulants. They increase alertness. They decrease appetite. As you'll see in a moment, in the 1960s, they were widely prescribed for weight loss. But the problem is they can cause dependence and even tolerance. Or not even tolerance. They can cause all the same kind of physical symptoms of dependence and tolerance that you would find in lots of other powerful drugs. People who use amphetamines chronically over long periods of time have been known to start to develop altered thoughts. Their thoughts can start to become paranoid, so they start feeling paranoia. They may start believing bizarre things that are not true, and these symptoms can look similar to schizophrenia. So these are not really meant to be used recreationally. They were used actually during World War I. This is probably when they were relatively new. Amphetamines were used to give to soldiers during World War I so they could stay awake if they were out on like an overnight watch, like looking for the enemy. They had to stay awake, and they would often get amphetamines. I mentioned how amphetamines used to be used to decrease appetite by prescription so people would lose weight. And here are a couple of quite striking ads from the 1960s that shows you the mindset of back then. The first one is very sexist. Round peg in a square hole, and that's, peg is the woman, and she's sitting in her VW Bug and trying to lose weight. And then there's another one, and check this out. This is in quite a amazing type of ad where they say when they stop smoking, they often overeat. So if you quit smoking, why don't you take amphetamines instead so you don't overeat? What would often happen is people would replace the smoking addiction with amphetamines and then become addicted to them. So it was so they're definitely not prescribed for weight loss, and they haven't been for decades. Finally, the last type of stimulant we're going to look at is methamphetamine. Methamphetamine have also been around. Has also been around for a long time. It's similar to amphetamines, but stronger. It goes by street names such as speed, ice, meth, crystal meth. Those are all names for methamphetamine. These are drugs made in home labs, and I never really watched the show much, but I know about the show. Breaking Bad was about making meth. That was there was a chemistry teacher who cooked meth using his chemistry skills, and these can cause. You really have to have some serious knowledge to do this because it can be extremely dangerous. It can cause explosions, and it happens all the time where you have people in remote areas in an abandoned barn, maybe on a big, huge property of a farm, cooking meth, and then it blows up because they're not careful. And they're using highly explosive products. Methamphetamine can be used in many, many different forms, and that's part of the reason why it rose in popularity for the last 30 years. It can be taken in pill form, injected, snorted, smoked, pretty much all the different ways that drugs are used. Methamphetamine can be used. One other thing about methamphetamine that it's more of a bit of trivia. Maybe I don't know if you ever noticed that if you go to CVS and try to buy an over-the-counter decongestant that has pseudoephedrine in it. Pseudoephedrine is it's a nasal decongestant. It stops you from having a runny nose. And the most common brand name of pseudoephedrine is Sudafed. It's these little tiny red pills. Maybe you've had them when you're sick. Well, back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, police started noticing when they'd arrest people for drug possession or drug trafficking, and they started to find hundreds of empty packets of Sudafed in the back of their car. Sudafed comes in little, they call them blister packs, where you pop the pill through some thin tin foil or something. Well, it turns out Sudafed is used as a starting kind of the basis for a lot of meth recipes. And for that reason, you can't walk into CVS anymore and find it on the shelf. You have to buy it. I think it's at the pharmacy. I think you have to go to the pharmacist. And as far as I know, you need to be 21 to even buy it. And it's not because the drug is particularly dangerous. I don't know if you just heard my dog. He was growling at something outside. It's not because Sudafed is particularly dangerous. It's more that people use it to make illegal drugs. So they kind of messed it up for everyone. Okay, so that is it for stimulants. Thank you for checking this out, and see you on the next video.